Nestled in the heart of downtown Seattle, directly below the Space Needle, and right next to this row of huge fake bamboo plants, you'll find this very interesting museum. This is Seattle's Pop Culture and Sci-Fi Museum. If you're a sci-fi buff and you're in town, this is a must-see for you. The first work of art you'll see in this museum is the building itself. Here's a model of the framework that holds this building up. You can see it's not quite normal. Even though the outside of the building looks smooth and simple, although curvaceous, it's anything but. The skin of this building is 6 layers thick, and putting this thing together must have been an absolute nightmare for the construction people. Rather than slapping on a coat of paint, they used some unique methods to color this building. However, when you walk by and look at the outside of the shell, you may see stuff like this that'll remind you back to the days when you used to work on commercial aircraft. But pay no mind to the man behind the curtain. Let's head inside and look at the wonders this building has to offer us. The museum hours are 10 to 5 daily, except Wednesdays. Immediately upon entering the building, make sure to look up at the ceiling. They don't waste a single square inch. The museum displays seem to be grouped by genre. The largest display is their Infinite Worlds collection, which is science fiction. Their Scared to Death gallery is based around horror movies. There's a very small but totally cool fantasy gallery. And on the day we toured the museum, we had 2 other collections, the Hall of Fame for Science Fiction and Famous Guitarists. Let's jump straight into the meat and potatoes and go to the Infinite Worlds science fiction display. Immediately upon entering, you'll have to bend your head back as you look up at this 7-foot-tall, exact replica robot. He came to Earth in 1951 to warn the humans to stop their escalating violence during the Cold War. I'll leave each of the pictures of all the plaques on the screen long enough to give you time to pause it if you want to take time to read them. They're all quite interesting. Probably the most famous robot out there, the Terminator. The details that went into building this thing are simply astounding. There have been many different types of Terminator movies, but this is the very first one that came out. And in my mind, the most impressive robot out there. I'll tell you, if you ever start your own robot company and you want to get free press, just call your company Cyberdyne. Next up, Greedo from our 1977 Star Wars, the first one. Well, the first one actually released the film. That series has the whole skipping around the timeline thing going on. I've eventually given up trying to figure it out. Back in 1980, they still used stop-motion photography. This is the model that the Empire used to make their all-terrain personnel transport, and the helmet as well as clothing of the unlucky rebels that had to face it. One of the most convincing hoaxes ever pulled up was called War of the Worlds. It was a Halloween radio broadcast back in 1938, and it was based on a book written by prolific author H.G. Wells. Here's an interesting factoid about the next subject. That's the Aliens franchise. You could ask, is this actually a horror film or a sci-fi film? Well, actually it's both, depending on the title of the movie. If the title has a single alien name, like the word alien, it's designed as a suspense horror movie. If the title has multiple alien names in it, like Aliens, the intent of the movie was a sci-fi action flick. The detail in this modeling is simply astounding. The movie Blade Runner is one of those hard-to-follow sci-fi movies that actually have a cult following. Many of the exhibits in this museum have small television screens that show snippets of each of the movies they're portraying. If you've ever wondered what it's like to fly a starship, now's your opportunity to find out. Let's jump ahead to Back to the Future. pun intended. This is what the hoverboards will look like. I wonder how much money Mattel paid to get their name printed on this hoverboard. If you're a fan of both comedy and sci-fi, then the movie Galaxy Quest is a movie you absolutely must watch. Watch it tonight.
Okay.
And to convince you, they have a large display that shows part of the movie. It worked on me. I went straight home, dusted off the DVD, and watched it that night. Oh, for you younger people, DVDs is how us older people used to watch movies before streaming. Continuing the comedy sci-fi genre, we have Ghostbusters. Any place there's a blank wall without a display, they put some amazing pictures up. If you're a Doctor Who fan, they got you covered. The Imperial Dalek. By far the most impressive model they have in the museum is the Death Star 2. This thing is huge and very, very detailed. Notice I used two varies there. That means it's twice as impressive as a single vary. This Imperial TIE Fighter has seen better days. Let's move over from Star Wars to Star Trek. When you see some of the original props they used in the old movies, it's actually pretty amazing at how simple they were. The buttons actually didn't do anything, they just hit them randomly when they were told to hit a button. The movie Planet of the Apes, Cornelius was a major character. Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines, out in 2003. Animatronic is the technique of making and operating lifelike robots. So basically a large puppet operated by electronics. And you know they couldn't leave the movie Battlestar Galactica out of a sci-fi display. This is the uniform the Viper pilots wore, as well as their pre-flight checklist on their knee. They carried this pistol here in case they met someone like this. This display was somewhat mesmerizing to just sit here and watch. As I watched this, I would just wonder what mathematical formula did they use to draw it with. Let's head on over to their horror movies section. Immediately upon walking in the door, you come across this. As totally impressive as this is, and it is very impressive, I can't but help to wonder if a person can think this up has any trouble sleeping at night. There's a couple plaques of some well-known monsters. And they're located next to a tank full of water with severed heads in it. As you're standing there reading this sign, the dark screen next to it jumps alive and scares the bejesus out of you. Remember earlier I said Alien can be a horror or a sci-fi. They were nice enough to include the horror aspects of this show. So, how many people noticed that aliens have 6 fingers? All the easier to grab you with. And of course you have to include everybody's nightmare, the face hugger. I was actually shocked at how big this thing is. But if it's going to wrap that tail around your neck, it's got to be really long. You can't forget to include the slice and dice movies. I'm sorry, but I have absolutely no idea what this was. We've got the vampires, in this case, the character Blade. The oldie but goodie classic, Frankenstein. Well, bet they had fun building this thing. Apocalypse movies are included. Wow, that's a lot of teeth. We move over to Halloween. I think it's a slice and dice movie. I don't actually watch that kind of stuff, but he looks kind of slicey. However, I have seen this movie several times. It's great. Critters. And on the way out of the gallery, they have this. What are they trying to tell us? The fantasy gallery is pretty small, but where they lack in quantity, they made up for it in quality. There's a Conan display, and after seeing the size and weight of this sword, you have to be ripped to the gills with muscles to swing it. I've never seen a Game of Thrones, but it looks like it was set in the medieval period. As well as Lord of the Rings. While I was in there, I spent at least 10 minutes admiring the detail in this fella. There are some really truly talented artists out there. Dungeons & Dragons falls into the fantasy genre, and as an up-and-coming welder, I wonder how many thousands of hours it took to make this giant dragonfly hanging from the roof. Immediately inside the front door of the museum is the Sci-Fi Hall of Fame. It highlights all the people that have made a great impact on the world of science fiction. Both authors and actors are covered. Sigourney Weaver has starred in over 70 movies. And probably her most famous role is the Aliens franchise. This is the jacket that she wore on the Nostromo in the first episode of Aliens. I would absolutely love to put a patch like this on each of my jackets. Stan Lee, not only an author, but an actor. He's been in at least 102 movies. In his spare time, he single-handedly changed the face of the American comic book industry. The next display comes from the Star Wars movie. Luke gets his hand cut off by Darth Vader, and it landed here. This wall honors every single person that's been inducted into the Science Fiction Hall of Fame. Okay, doesn't have to be a person. We got my buddy Godzilla, E. Doc Smith, the father of the space opera. The space opera is a large-scale, often melodramatic space adventure of conflicts typically involving interstellar warfare, galactic empires, and romance. The first series he wrote was called the Lensman series. It's a great read, done it a couple of times. Lee Brackett does a great job of combining science fiction with fantasy. Her Eric John Stark series will leave you sitting on the seat of your pants. Obviously, Ridley Scott's going to be here because he invented Aliens. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is actually a musical. It has such a cult following, there are actually theaters dedicated to only showing this show over and over and over again. Let's take a look at some of the other members of this very exclusive club. The X-Files, a television series where two FBI agents are trying to track down aliens that are trying to conquer the planet Earth. In the 80s, if you wanted to play a video game, you had to go to a video arcade at a mall. So of course they made the movie Tron, about a person that gets sucked into a video game and has to play for real. This is an animatronic mask worn during the making of the movie Species 2. The spacesuits worn during the making of Lost in Space sure did look hot, especially with all those bright lights shining down on them. Rod Serling, best known for his work on The Twilight Zone, which focused on the insightful science fiction, fantasy, psychological horror, and paranormal. He also wrote the script for the movie Planet of the Apes. Of course, you cannot talk science fiction without knowing who John W. Campbell is. Known as the father of science fiction. To get people involved in writing science fiction, he created a magazine. It was originally called Astounding Science Fiction, but the name was later changed to Analog. This man is so important that the top award in science fiction is called the John W. Campbell Award. Interestingly enough, when he wrote material that was not science fiction, he used a pen name Don A. Stewart. I have several of those books and never knew it was John W. Campbell that wrote them. Anyway, an extremely scary horror book he wrote, Who Goes There?, was turned into the movie The Thing. Isaac Asimov. Can we call him the father of robotics books? He wrote The 3 Laws of Robotics, which today is the template for moral and ethical use of robots. Those laws are as follows. 1. A robot must obey humans. 2. A robot must obey human orders, unless it conflicts with the first law. And 3. A robot must protect its own existence, unless it conflicts with the first or second law. Isaac Asimov wrote over 500 books on this mechanical typewriter. He must have had really strong fingers. Dungeons & Dragons is a role-playing game. I'm proud to say that I was once a dungeon master. If you enjoy dragons, Anne McCaffrey is the author you want to go after. Looking at the blade on this sword, it sure seems to be well used. I personally feel Godzilla should have had his own gallery. He's the man. But I'm kind of biased. As a 9-year-old, I used to ride my Schwinn 5-speed Stingray 7 miles into town, so I could watch the latest Godzilla double feature at the theater. Interestingly enough, if you study Godzilla movies, the vast majority of them are based on whatever moral or ethical problems is happening in Japan at the time. Sorry, I had to sneak in a selfie with Godzilla. They had this huge touch screen there where you could look up information on any author that you wanted. You could quite literally spend hours at this one display. This is a costume used during one of the Star Trek filmings. James McCameron, The Terminator series. This is a page out of the script as they were filming Aliens. An interesting note, I didn't see anything about the movie Predator in this entire museum. So sorry, don't know what this is, but if you do, please leave a comment. There were several TV screens there that displayed a multitude of different things like book covers, information about authors, and movies. It also included several interviews with movie producers. So, once again, plan a couple hours here. One thing that simply amazed me was how some of the earlier science fiction stuff looks so fake. I guess this is okay since they hadn't invented high resolution yet. But this even includes things from high-profile movies like Darth Vader's suit. It looks like someone sure had fun with their color palette making this suit. I can't imagine hanging onto this lightsaber handle would be comfortable. Looks like it would just cut into your hand. This is the suit they used when the Liquid Terminator got shot by a shotgun. Some of the other suits on display here include the outfit that Prince wore. Pretty sure that doesn't fall under the science fiction category. And I think we'll finish up with Batman. Here's the Batman suit that George Clooney wore during the movie. I was a little curious when I saw a whole bunch of ladies hanging out behind this display. So I went over to take a look. What are they looking at? Okay, I understand. Ever wonder what George Clooney's derriere looks like? As part of the pop culture of this museum, they have a pretty impressive guitar gallery, starting with a huge guitar tree out in the front. Each of these plaques describes a famous musician, and on display is the guitar that they used. Unfortunately, Buddy Holly's the only one I recognized. I don't get out much.